Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know where you are from. Also, what time is it? You ever step into a place and feel like the land itself doesn't want you there? That's what it felt like the moment I crossed into Ntuma. The sun was still high, but something in the air was wrong. Too still. No birds, no wind, just the hum of heat pressing down like a warning. I had come to Pemba for work, the kind that doesn't ask too many questions. Cartography, they called it. But truthfully, I was here for the money. Some remote development company was paying good cash to map uncharted terrain, and this village, tucked deep in the northern reaches of Mozambique, had been nothing more than a footnote in old Portuguese records. No one had updated its location in decades. It was supposed to be a simple assignment: mark the coordinates, snap some photos, and move on. But from the first moment, something whispered, "Turn back." My guide, Paulo, was a stocky man with leathery skin and eyes too old for his face. He didn't say much on the journey up. When I asked about Ntuma, he stiffened. "It is not Ntuma," he said, eyes still on the road. "It is Mapaco's place." I asked what that meant, but he only shook his head and gripped the wheel tighter. We parked the jeep where the dirt road narrowed into a footpath choked with overgrowth. "No car goes further," Paulo muttered. "From here you walk. You're not coming." He glanced at the canopy overhead. "I will wait. If you're not back by sunset, I leave." "You serious?" His answer was the silence of someone who'd seen too much. So I strapped my camera over my shoulder, adjusted my backpack, and stepped into the jungle. The forest was heavy with scent, damp earth, old rot, the distant trace of firewood smoke. The path twisted and forked until it gave way to a clearing where the huts stood like forgotten bones. Straw roofs sagged. Doors hung open. Not a soul in sight. The village was abandoned. Or so I thought. At the edge of the clearing stood a figure, motionless, barely visible through the veil of trees. He wore something long and dark, like a robe stitched from ash and bark. His head tilted ever so slightly, watching. I froze. "Hello." My voice came out thinner than I'd meant. No response. I took a cautious step forward. Still nothing. The man just stood there, half hidden by vines and shadow. Another step, then another. The figure slowly turned and vanished behind a tree. I chased after him, crashing through undergrowth, heart thudding in my chest. But by the time I reached the tree, there was nothing, just silence, and a lingering scent in the air, like burnt cloves or old blood. That's when I saw the shrine. Nestled between the roots was a mound of black stones, arranged in a spiral. Feathers, red, black, and yellow, were tied to sticks planted in the soil around it. In the center, a rusted tin can held a bundle of waxy, dried flowers. Something about the arrangement felt wrong, off balance. I raised my camera. Just as I clicked the shutter, a gust of wind surged from nowhere, knocking me back a step. Leaves flew. Dust swirled. And that smell returned, stronger this time. I turned to run, but the path I had taken was gone. Branches reached inward like arms, tangling behind me. I blinked, confused, and spun around. The huts were still there, but something had changed. The air, denser now, like being trapped under a blanket underwater. Then I heard the singing, a voice, low, drawn out, not in Portuguese, not in Swahili. It rose and fell like a chant. I scanned the treetops, the clearing, the dark hut doorways. Nothing. But it was close. I crept forward, one foot after the other. I didn't want to go deeper. My instincts were screaming, but I couldn't leave without at least trying to get my bearings. I ducked inside the largest hut, the one with faded red markings around the frame. Inside, it was pitch black. I clicked on my flashlight and swept the beam around. The walls were covered in drawings, charcoal stick figures dancing around a central shape. A tall figure, limbs too long, a blank circle for a face. Mapiko. I didn't know how I knew the name, but it echoed in my mind as if whispered. The flashlight flickered. No, not now. I hit it with my palm. It flickered again and died. Total darkness. Then a breath. Not mine. Right behind me. I turned, but there was no space. Nothing but the wall. And then I heard it, right at my ear. Not a breath. A whisper. You saw the stones. I ran. Crashing out of the hut, stumbling through undergrowth, hands torn by thorns, lungs burning. When I burst back into the clearing, Paulo was standing by the jeep, wide-eyed engine, already running. He didn't ask questions, just nodded once and drove. Fast. We didn't stop until we hit the main road. By then, the sun had dipped below the horizon, and the first stars began to prick the sky. Paulo finally looked at me and said, "You should never have gone in." I tried to ask why, but my voice cracked. "There are spirits that remember," he said. "And some do not forget what was stolen." I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Because in my camera, the picture I took before the wind, there was no shrine, no stones. Just that figure, standing, watching, closer than before. I left Pemba the next morning, or at least I tried to. I woke at first light, packed everything, and paid Paulo double to drive me back toward the airport. He didn't say much, but I noticed he didn't look me in the eyes. Not once. Something had shifted. Something was following me. We were halfway down the cracked road heading south when I finally dared to open my camera again. The photo I'd taken, the one where I'd expected to see the shrine, was even more disturbing in the daylight. There was someone in the frame, a man or thing in dark, tattered robes, standing just behind where I had been. No face, just a blur where feature should have been, like the lens refused to focus. And behind him, shadows bled into unnatural shapes, stretching farther than they should. I checked the metadata. I'd only taken one shot in that clearing. But there were 3 photos. One was blurry, one was sharp, and the third, I never took the third. It was me, asleep in my hotel room, taken from the foot of the bed. I stared at it, breath caught in my throat. In the image, my arms were crossed, and the sheet covered half my face. The timestamp said it was taken at 2:47 a.m. I had been asleep. I hadn't left the room. The door had been locked. No windows open. I looked at Paulo. "Did you touch my camera?" He glanced over, gave a slight shake of the head. "I don't touch spirits things." I didn't ask again. We reached the edge of the city by late morning. The air was hotter here, but less heavy. It almost felt normal. Almost. Paulo pulled to a stop outside a small roadside cafe. "I don't go further. The spirits won't follow me here." He crossed his arms. "But you carry them now." I climbed out slowly. "What does that mean?" He pointed to my chest. "You took something from the forest." I instinctively checked my pockets. "No, I didn't." He frowned. "Not with hands, with eyes, with memory." Before I could answer, he drove off, the back of his jeep kicking up a swirl of red dust that clung to my skin like ash. I spent the next 3 hours in the airport lounge, trying to shake the unease. Planes came and went. People bustled around, buying snacks, taking selfies, making noise. But I couldn't settle. Something was watching me. That night, after finally landing back in Maputo, I checked into a hotel by the water. Nice place. Clean, quiet. I drew the curtains tight, left the TV on low, and sat at the edge of the bed flipping through my notebook. Everything I'd written about Nintuma felt incomplete. As though I'd only scratched the surface of something much older than I could comprehend. The charcoal figure on the hut wall, the spiral of stones, the whisper in the dark, and that name, Mapiko, it clung to me like wet cloth. I needed answers, so I started asking questions. First, I called a friend of mine, a professor of African anthropology who'd spent time in Mozambique. I didn't say much, just enough to get him curious. "Mapiko," he said over the line. "That's a Makanda tradition. Masked dancers used in initiation ceremonies, funerals, things like that. But it's not a person. It's more symbolic, like a force. Could it be more than that? He paused. Some locals treat Mapiko as a spirit, a protector sometimes. Other times, something more vengeful. It depends on the village, the story. Why do you ask? I hesitated. I saw something. Out in the bush. Static buzzed through the line. You didn't bring anything back. Did you? I don't think so. Then hope that's true. He hung up. That night I dreamed of the clearing again. Only this time it wasn't empty. The huts were lit from within by an eerie green glow, and figures danced around the spiral shrine. Their faces were covered by wooden masks, each one carved into a grotesque grin. At the center stood him, the same figure from the photo, arms outstretched, palms upward, robe moving like smoke in the wind. He pointed at me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then the fire from the shrine flared up, and the dancers all turned, masks cracking open like eggshells to reveal nothing. No faces, just darkness. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. It was 2:47 a.m. Exactly, the same time the photo had been taken. I jumped from bed and threw the lights on. The room was empty. Door still locked. No signs of a break-in. But on the floor near the foot of the bed, something lay half buried under the edge of the carpet. A feather. Red, black, and yellow. The same colors from the shrine and the clearing. I didn't bring it with me. I never touched anything. At least, I thought I hadn't. The feather didn't belong in my hotel room. I stared at it for a long time, unwilling to touch it. My first instinct was to grab a towel and flush it, get rid of it. But something held me back. It wasn't just a feather. It was a message. A marker. A quiet announcement that whatever I had seen in that village, it wasn't staying behind. I picked it up using a pen and placed it on the corner table. No sudden visions. No electric shock. Just a sick, growing sense that something had been set in motion. That morning, I skipped breakfast, locked the room, and took a taxi across the city to the National Anthropology Museum. I figured if anyone could help explain what I had seen, or at least point me toward the right books, it would be someone there. Inside, the air was cool, the halls quiet. Most of the exhibits focused on traditional dress, masks, hunting tools, and everyday village life. Beautiful, intricate, almost peaceful. But toward the back, behind glass, I found what I didn't know I was looking for. A feathered crown, red, black, and yellow. Beside it, a small plaque read, ceremonial headdress used by Mapiko dancers. Colors represent life, death, and transformation. Rarely seen outside initiation or exorcism rites in northern Mozambique. Next to it hung a faded photograph, grainy and scratched. It showed a circle of masked dancers surrounding a fire. In the background, barely visible in the smoke, was a figure, cloaked, shadowed, and eerily familiar. No face, no definition. Just like in my photo, I asked the museum staff if I could speak to a curator. A woman named Dr. Anima Bands eventually met me in the hall, curious but reserved. I showed her the image on my camera, the one I didn't take. Me asleep. Then the one from the forest, the blurred man behind me. She went pale. This is not a prank. No. She took a breath, steadied herself, and glanced over her shoulder as if someone might be listening. We don't talk about these things in the open, she whispered. Not because we are afraid of superstition, but because it remembers. Speaking its name too often gives it weight. It listens. What is it? I asked, quieter now. She looked me straight in the eyes. Not a spirit, not a god, not even a demon. We call it the Nameless One. It is invited, always, by accident or arrogance. People stumble into the old spaces, disturb what shouldn't be disturbed, and they don't always know they've done it. I swallowed. I didn't mean to. I didn't touch anything. That doesn't matter, she said. The old ones say that seeing is sometimes enough. And if it sees you back, She didn't finish. I tried to press her. How do I stop it? Undo it. She sighed. You can't undo a story once it starts telling you. But maybe you can offer something. Like what? A trade. That night, I returned to my hotel room and found the lights already on. Strange. I never leave them on. The red feather was gone. In its place, on the bedside table, sat a small, circular mirror. Ornate, carved from something dark and heavy, maybe ebony, maybe bone. Hard to tell. I picked it up carefully. At first, it showed only my reflection. But then the image shifted. My face blurred. Behind me, something flickered, a shape rising in the corner of the room. Not fully there, not fully gone. It watched through the mirror. When I turned around, there was nothing. But the air was wrong. Thick. Still. Electric. I placed the mirror down, backing away. That night, I didn't sleep. At exactly 2:47 a.m., the bathroom door creaked open slowly, on its own. I watched from the bed, phone in hand, flashlight ready. But nothing came out. Instead, I heard breathing. Not mine. Slow. Wet. Inhaling through teeth that didn't quite fit a human mouth. I turned on the light. Empty. Completely empty. I didn't stay another night. The next day, I called Dr. Anna again. I told her about the mirror. Silence on the other end. Then she said something that chilled my blood. Don't break it. Don't cover it. Don't throw it away. Whatever watches you through it. It wants you to try. That's the game. The exchange. If you reject the gift, it takes something in return. What does it take? Memories. Voice. Sometimes time. Sometimes blood. Depends on how deep you looked into its world. I asked her what I could offer instead. What kind of trade could be made? She told me, stories are the only currency it understands. I didn't understand. You mean like telling someone what happened? No, she said. You have to carry the story. Let it change you. Let it become part of you. Only then will it leave until it's ready for someone else. That night I dreamed again. This time, I wasn't in the forest or my hotel room. I was in a village I didn't recognize, ancient, pre-colonial, untouched by time. People moved about silent. No one spoke. Children ran without making sound. Smoke curled from empty fires. In the center of the square stood the same spiral of stones. Only this time, it wasn't empty. The cloaked figure waited, arms out and behind him. 100 faces. Blank, ageless, floating just behind the veil of the visible. He beckoned, and I walked forward. I woke up screaming. I found a second feather beside my bed. This one was black, and I remembered what Dr. Anna said. Life, death, transformation. The red feather had marked the beginning. Now came death. I checked out of the hotel the next morning. I didn't say goodbye, didn't bother with breakfast, didn't leave a forwarding address. I just packed what I could and moved to a small guest house run by an older couple on the edge of town. No online listings, no cameras, no records. Just a quiet place with no mirrors. The mirror was still in my backpack, wrapped tightly in 2 shirts, buried beneath everything else. I'd tried throwing it into the bay, but somehow, it ended up on the nightstand the next morning, bone, dry and glinting like it never left my room. Dr. Anna was right. You can't reject it. You can only carry it. The woman who ran the guest house was named Esther. A kind face, careful words. She offered tea and asked no questions. Her husband, Alberto, barely spoke, just nodded once, and returned to his whittling. Little wooden statues. Some of people, some of birds, but most of things. Creatures with mouths too wide and limbs in the wrong places. I asked him once, "What are those from?" He replied in a low, scratchy voice, "Dreams." That night I walked into the town center just after sundown. I needed distraction, needed to be around voices that didn't whisper. Kids played in the streets. Vendors closed stalls. Music drifted from an old radio outside a cafe. For a brief moment, it felt almost normal, until I saw her. She stood across the road, motionless, facing me. Thin, still, and pale like paper. Her clothes looked too clean, like they'd been stitched together for a movie and never worn in real life. She didn't blink. Didn't move. Her eyes. They weren't just blank, they were hollow. As if the sockets were there, but nothing lived behind them. Not even shadow. And then she smiled. A wide, aching stretch of lips that didn't match her face. No one else noticed her. People moved around her like she didn't exist. I blinked once and she was standing closer. Across the cafe entrance now. The smile never faded. I backed away slowly, heart pounding. No one seemed to see her. I turned to go, and when I looked back, she was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the floor, my back to the wall, watching the door. My phone flashlight aimed and ready. At 3:12 a.m., I heard her voice. It came from the hallway. A soft, dragging whisper. "Tell me your name." The voice didn't match her appearance. It was deeper. Worn like old cloth, frayed at the edges. I didn't move. "Tell me your name." Closer now. I grabbed the mirror. I didn't want to. Every part of me screamed not to touch it. But I didn't have a choice. I had to see. I unwrapped it, pointed it toward the door, and looked. In the reflection, she was standing on the ceiling. Limbs twisted backward like a spider, her mouth stretching into the frame, like she wanted to crawl through it. Her eyes were gaping holes of black, and they were fixed on me. The next day I demanded answers. I returned to the museum, but Dr. Anna wasn't there. The receptionist said she had taken a sudden leave of absence. No notice, no word. Just vanished. Her apartment door was locked, the windows shut. No one had seen her since I last spoke to her. I tried to reach her cell. Disconnected. Instead, I went to the university and found a linguistics professor who specialized in tribal dialects. I didn't show him the mirror. Just described the feather, the spiral, and the cloaked figure. When I mentioned the red feather and the second, black one, his eyes narrowed. "You should not be involved with these things," he said flatly. "What are they?" I asked. "What do they want?" He hesitated. Then finally, "They're not spirits in the way you think. They're stories given shape. Old ones. They were once warnings passed down orally. But over time, the warning became a ritual. The ritual became a door. A door to where?" He shook his head. "Not a place. A pattern. Once it starts, it has to finish. You are now a thread in it. What happens when it finishes? No one knows. No one survives the last feather." Back at the guest house, I found Alberto waiting at my door. He held a small wooden carving of the woman with the hollow eyes. He handed it to me without a word and walked off. I turned it over in my hands. It was too perfect, too detailed, down to the stitched folds of her unnatural dress. At the base, a word was carved, one I didn't recognize. I looked it up. It was from Makonde, an ancient dialect, barely used today. The translation, "She who asks." I barely slept. The next morning I found scratch marks on the walls inside my room, 4 long, vertical gashes near the window. Deep, fresh. No one else had keys. And then I noticed the mirror again. The third feather had appeared inside the frame. No longer red or black, but white, drifting in slow motion, inside the glass. Transformation. Just like the plaque said, the end of the beginning. Or maybe the beginning of the end. And the woman, she was in the reflection now, standing beside me. I left the guest house before sunrise. Didn't pack. Didn't leave a note. Just took the mirror, wrapped in the same blood-specked shirts I'd first found it in. I couldn't risk staying in one place for too long. It was following me now. Not just watching, mimicking. I'd glimpsed something in the reflection the night before. A shape that looked like me, but didn't move the way I did. It stood behind me in the glass, tilting its head the opposite way, smiling when I wasn't. I blinked once. It didn't. The image froze, and then it waved. I took a bus heading north. A dusty, rusting beast that groaned with every mile. The driver didn't ask questions. Neither did the few other passengers. Everyone kept to themselves, eyes low, ears closed. I sat near the back and kept the mirror hidden in my bag. The landscape blurred by in muted browns and greens. Clusters of withered trees, sand, worn huts, and the occasional lonely figure standing far too still in the middle of nowhere. Watching. Always watching. After about 4 hours, we reached a junction, a fork in the road surrounded by thick bush. The driver pulled over, looked back, and said, "This is where you get off." I didn't say aye. "This is where you get off," he repeated. His eyes didn't blink. His hand pointed to a narrow dirt path that led into the trees. I hesitated, but something in me knew better than to argue. I stepped off the bus. It pulled away without another word. I was alone. The path twisted for what felt like hours. No birds. No wind. Just the crunch of dry leaves beneath my feet and the ever-present pressure of being observed. At some point, I realized the trees had grown unnaturally tall, their trunks swollen, their branches tangled like bone. Then I saw the house. It stood crooked at the edge of a small clearing, half sunken into the earth as if trying to retreat. The wood was dark, wet with age. Windows shattered. Door hanging open like a yawning mouth. But it wasn't abandoned. Smoke curled from a broken chimney, and on the porch, a woman rocked in a chair that didn't creak. She looked up as I approached, her eyes wide with recognition, not surprise. "I was wondering when you'd come," she said. Her voice was scratchy, dry as wind across stone. "You know me?" "Not yet, but I've seen you. In the mirror. Inside the house?" The air was thick with mildew and time, walls lined with frames, each one filled not with photos, but feathers. Hundreds of them, every color, every size, some old and cracked, others pristine and glistening. "Each feather is a story," the woman said behind me. "A path taken, a choice made. Most of them end in silence." I turned to face her. She stood now, hands clasped. "You've seen her," she continued. "She who asks?" "The hollow-eyed woman?" I nodded. "She's the first of 3, the woman said. "Each reveals more of the truth. Each asks a price." "What truth?" She stepped closer. Her skin was thin, almost translucent. I could see faint blue veins along her temples, like river lines. "That you don't belong to yourself anymore." She led me to a back room, small, round, with a dirt floor. In the center stood a chair, and on the wall opposite, a mirror exactly like mine, frame, spiral, everything. She pointed. "Sit." I didn't move. "If you want to understand," she said, "you have to face it. Directly. No more glimpses. No more turning away." I sat. She placed my mirror on my lap and stood behind me. "No, look." I raised the glass. At first, nothing happened. Just my reflection, tired and worn. The glass shimmered. My face melted. Not physically, but within the mirror. The features blurred, stretched, twisted. My eyes sank into black hollows. My mouth opened wide in a scream I couldn't hear. The image shifted again, to a hallway. Dark, long, endless. At the far end stood a figure. I recognized it immediately. Myself, but not me. It raised its hand and pointed at me. The mirror cracked, not on the outside, but within the reflection. And then it whispered. 3 words. "You are chosen." I dropped the mirror. It didn't shatter. Instead, the 3rd feather, the white one, began to disintegrate inside the glass, as if being consumed by flame without smoke. A 4th feather appeared. Not red, not blight. Blue. It pulsed with a faint glow, almost like a heartbeat. The woman gasped. "No," she muttered. That wasn't supposed to appear yet." "What does it mean?" I asked. She looked at me, truly afraid for the first time. "It means the mirror isn't just following the old patterns anymore. It's changing, and it's changing with you." I left the house before dusk. She warned me not to stay past dark. "They come when the sun dies," she said. "Not just her. All of them. The ones who didn't finish their stories. The ones who stayed in the mirror too long." As I walked down the path again, The air felt heavier. The trees leaned closer. Somewhere far off, I heard a lullaby, but it was being sung backwards. That night, I found shelter in an abandoned chapel farther up the coast. No doors, just stone and dust. I stared into the mirror one last time before trying to sleep. There were now two versions of me in the reflection, each standing on either side of my image, smiling, and behind them, on the wall, was something new, a symbol. A jagged spiral burned into stone. I didn't understand it then, but I would. The dream started with whispers, faint, like wind weaving through cracks. Then came the image. Not a memory, not quite a vision, just a blur of motion in the dark. Something dragging itself forward. Slow, deliberate. Its breath was all I could hear. Heavy, wet, and wrong. I woke up in the chapel with my fingernails torn. They'd been clawing at the stone wall beside me while I slept. The mirror lay on the floor again, perfectly upright, and now there were three versions of me in the reflection. All smiling, all motionless. The spiral on the wall, the same symbol that had appeared in the glass, had somehow bled into the real world. It was there, burned into the actual stone behind me. And it wasn't just drawn. It was carved. I don't remember walking into the jungle, but that's where I found myself. Barefoot, clothes wet from dew, mirror gripped in one hand like a weapon. My head pulsed with pressure, like something inside was trying to push out. Then I heard it, that backward lullaby again. Only this time, it was coming from a child. I turned. A little girl stood at the edge of the trail. She was barefoot too, wearing a red dress caked with dust. Her eyes were too wide, and they didn't blink. "You dropped this," she said. She held out a feather, blue, just like the one in the mirror. "I didn't drop anything," I said, taking a step back. She moved closer. "You will," she whispered. "Everyone does." And then she wasn't a girl anymore. The skin on her face peeled back in one motion, like fabric being unzipped. Underneath was a face stitched from others. Dozens, lips overlapping, nostrils where ears should be, and every set of eyes blinked out of sync. I ran. Branches tore at me. Thorns dug into my calves. But I didn't stop, because when I looked over my shoulder, the thing was walking after me, calmly, slowly, but its limbs were growing with each step, arms stretching, neck elongating. One of the heads behind its stitched skin let out a sound like a child choking on a laugh. I didn't stop until I reached a river. Even then, I only paused because the world had gone quiet, completely. No birds, no bugs, not even my own breathing. That's when I saw the boat. No one was rowing it. No one sat inside. But it waited. The moment I stepped in, it began to move, cutting across the water with no sound, no wake. And the mirror, it hummed in my hand. That symbol, the spiral, pulsed again behind the reflection. With every beat, something deep inside me answered. My heart was sensing to the rhythm of the spiral. The boat passed under a canopy of trees so thick they blocked out the sky. The water turned black, not from shadow, but because it wasn't water anymore. It was mirror, reflective, endless, and beneath the surface I saw them, the three versions of me, floating, eyes open, watching, smiling. The boat stopped at a wooden dock, half rotten and wrapped in moss. A path led into stone, not a cave, exactly, but something older. Built. Chiseled by hands that didn't work with logic. The entrance was shaped like the spiral, and as I stepped inside, the mirror grew warm in my hand. The walls were covered in symbols I couldn't read, but my eyes moved across them like they knew the language. My brain translated on instinct to see the truth. One must become a lie. The mirror remembers what you try to forget. There is no escape, only surrender or silence. At the end of the hall, a single door stood open. Behind it, a circular chamber, and in its center, a pool of liquid glass. Above it, suspended by chains, was another mirror, larger than mine. Its frame was made of bones. I stepped closer. My own reflection stared back at me, but this version looked clean, healthy. unharmed. He wore a crisp white shirt, no blood, no dirt. He looked rested, even peaceful. He smiled, and then said, "My name," out loud, but my lips didn't move. He took a step forward, inside the mirror, while I remained still. "You're not ready," he said. "What am I not ready for?" He tilted his head. "To remember." Suddenly, the pool beneath the mirror bubbled. Shapes swirled under its surface. Eyes, limbs, faces, forming and fading. "You broke the path," the reflection said, "but the spiral offered you another." I asked what he meant. He just pointed to the mirror in my hand. "It isn't showing you what you fear," he whispered. "It's showing you what you once were." The pool erupted. Liquid mirror splashed upward, but instead of falling back down, it hovered, held in the air by nothing. It twisted itself into a shape, a door, a new spiral made of silver and screaming, and I heard a voice not in my ears, but inside my ribs. "You are the key in the cage." The moment I blinked, I was standing somewhere else. Not in the chamber, not in the jungle, but in a hospital, cold, fluorescent lights buzzing above. My hands were bound to a bed. Doctors stood over me, faces blurred, speaking in muffled tones. And at the foot of the bed stood her, the hollow-eyed woman, nodding slowly, as if everything had gone according to plan. Then I blinked again, back in the jungle, back on the path, covered in dirt and ash, the mirror still in my hand. And now there were 4 versions of me in the reflection, each one turning slowly, toward something I couldn't yet see. There are places on Earth where time doesn't move forward. It spirals inward, trapping everything in its coils. Pemba wasn't cursed by spirits or forgotten gods. It was cursed by remembrance, and I was starting to remember. The jungle around me hissed like it was breathing. Every tree leaned inward now, bending toward the path like eavesdroppers. The leaves didn't rustle. They twitched in patterns. My skin crawled, not because of the cold, but because I could feel eyes blinking from under the soil, watching, blinking in sync with mine. I tried throwing the mirror away again. It landed in the dirt face down. But as soon as it touched the ground, I heard a snap, like a bone breaking deep in my spine, and I dropped to my knees. My vision blurred, and in the reflection of a puddle near my feet, I saw my own back begin to shift. There was something under my skin, something moving. The spiral. It was no longer just a mark or a symbol. It was growing inside me. My spine bulged, not from pain, from pressure. The shape of the spiral was etching itself into my bones. I screamed. Birds took off from the canopy like a thunderclap, a rare sign of normalcy. But even they moved strangely, wings folding in slow, impossible rhythms. When the pain stopped, I stood up on legs that no longer felt fully mine. The jungle had changed. I was still on the same path, but it was now lined with mirrors on either side. Dozens, all hanging from tree branches by frayed ropes, swinging gently despite the still air. Each reflection showed a different version of me. Some smiling, some crying. One, just one, stood motionless with its head tilted sharply to the left, bleeding from both ears. And that one winked. I moved quickly after that. My legs carried me on instinct, through vines that seemed to part for me, toward something I couldn't name. My thoughts were no longer entirely my own. They were fragmenting. To see the truth, one must become a lie. The words from the spiral chamber echoed again. I reached a clearing. A massive stone face lay partially buried in the earth. Carved into it was the same spiral. Only this time, the eye at its center was open, and it wasn't stone. It was watching me, blinking. Its pupil dilated slowly, and when it reached full size, it wasn't black. It was a mirror, not a reflection of me, not anymore. It showed something else, a man in a suit sitting in a white room, surrounded by TVs, each one showing me at different points in the journey. Sleeping in the chapel, running through the jungle, screaming at the river, holding the mirror. He looked directly into the monitor, then raised his hand, and waved. The stone face began to hum, low, rhythmic. The same pitch I'd heard from the girl in the red dress, the same from the thing behind the chapel wall. It was all connected. The spiral wasn't a symbol. It was a signal, a call. I stepped forward, one hand trembling as I touched the eye. The stone shuddered, and then it cracked. A hole opened, a perfect circle, and beyond it, stairs spiraled downward into darkness. I followed. Not because I wanted to, but because every part of me already knew what was down there. The truth, or what was left of it. The air grew colder. Each step I took was accompanied by a new whisper, not from behind me, but from inside my bones. My ribs were holding on to secrets my mind couldn't grasp. The staircase ended at a vast underground chamber, walls lined with mirrors again. But these weren't made of glass. They were made of skin. Taut, stretched, and translucent, showing vague shapes behind them that shifted and twitched like trapped animals. I moved past them slowly, and then I saw it. At the center of the room, a stone pedestal. On it, not a mirror, but a mask, white porcelain. A single black spiral where the mouth should be. No eye holes. I stepped closer. Words were etched around the pedestal in blood. We're to become. Remove to vanish. I reached for the mask, and the moment I touched it, my vision fractured. Suddenly I was watching myself from above, hovering in the air, watching my own hand lift the mask to my face. But I didn't stop it, because somewhere deeper, I realized I had worn it before, dozens of times, hundreds. This wasn't my first visit to Pemba. This was my return. The mask fused to my face the second it touched my skin. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The spiral mouth pulsed once, then melted into my jaw. My limbs stiffened, and then I remembered. Not everything, just enough. I remembered the room of screens. I remembered being the one watching. I remembered putting on the mask and walking into the jungle to forget. To clean something from the world, or from myself. A ritual, one I had performed again and again. But this time, something was wrong. This time, the spiral changed. It opened inward. It let something else in. Something that wasn't meant to return. Now I wasn't the only one inside this body. There was something else in here with me. It whispered through my teeth, "You look too long." Now it looks back. The walls of skin began to stretch outward, as if pressing toward me. Faces pushed against the thin surface. Whispering, crying, some laughing. I backed away, and behind me, the path I'd come from had vanished. In its place, a mirror. My own. The one I had carried all this way. But the reflection had changed. It wasn't me anymore. It was him. The man from the screens. He stepped forward from the other side of the mirror, and I could feel him enter. Like smoke poured into my lungs. I blinked. And then I was standing outside the village again, dawn breaking, mirror in hand, clothes dry, no blood, no dirt, and my mouth curled into a smile I didn't control. I didn't walk back to the village. I just appeared. Feet planted in the same dry soil outside the chapel, facing a building that now looked entirely new. The broken boards and shattered windows were intact. The rotting door had been replaced, and the spiral above it, once faded, now shimmered like it had been freshly carved. Everything was rewinding. But the worst part, no one noticed. Children played outside the neighboring huts, women carried pots of water, and the old man from the hill was sitting cross-legged under the acacia tree, smiling at me like he'd seen me just yesterday. As if nothing had happened. As if I had never disappeared into the jungle for days. As if I had never worn the mask. As if the spiral had never opened. I walked through the village like a ghost. People greeted me with warmth. Names I didn't remember echoed around me like a mocking melody. Welcome back. Good to see you, brother. Did the river spirits show you the way? I nodded, smiled, laughed even. But inside, I was screaming, because I was watching myself again, from the outside. The smile on my face was someone else's, and deep behind my eyes, I saw him, The man from the mirror, adjusting his tie in a white room as if preparing for a broadcast. This wasn't memory. It was replay. But now, I wasn't the only player. I caught my reflection in a tin plate as a woman handed me some stew. It blinked a second too late. That was the first time I was sure something inside me had taken hold, and it wasn't pretending to be me anymore. It was becoming me. The woman smiled as I stood there, unmoving. "You've got the hunger," she said gently. "They always come back with hunger." I wanted to ask who she meant, but my mouth opened on its own and said, "They're almost here. Get them ready." Her face fell slack. Then, just as quickly, she nodded and walked off without another word. I stumbled to the edge of the village, near the same tree where the spiral first called to me in my dream. I fell to my knees and pressed my fingers into the dirt. Beneath the surface, I could feel it. The pulse. Not a heartbeat. A signal, like something was building, growing, waiting for release. And then, from behind me, a child's voice. "You're not the only one anymore." I turned slowly. A boy, no more than 7, stood barefoot, holding a dead bird in his hand. Its feathers were perfectly arranged in a spiral. "Who else?" I asked, but my voice came out distorted, like two echoes speaking at once. He pointed toward the chapel. "She's waking up too." I ran, or I tried to. Each step felt heavier, as if the ground didn't want me to leave. The chapel loomed again, now glowing faintly in the dying sunlight. But something was different. The front door was open. Inside, the pews were full. Villagers I didn't recognize sat quietly, staring forward. And at the front, where a pulpit had never existed before, stood the girl in the red dress. Only she wasn't a girl anymore. She was taller, paler. The spiral on her chest no longer drawn. It was burned into her flesh, glowing like coal. She locked eyes with me. "Welcome back, brother." And everyone turned to face me at once. Every single villager had my exact face. My knees gave out. They didn't approach, didn't speak, just watched. And their mouths slowly opened in unison. A low hum filled the air, that same resonance from the jungle, from the stone face, from the mask. But now it wasn't in my ears, it was in my teeth. Buzzing, grinding, trying to shake something loose from inside my skull. I grabbed the mirror from my satchel. Somehow it had returned to my side, and held it up. The glass was cracked, and the reflection looking back at me moved first. Not a delay, not a glitch. It moved before I did. It raised its hand before mine. It opened its mouth before mine. And then it whispered, "You brought the key." The mirror shattered in my hands, not from impact, from intention. It had shown me too much, and now it had fulfilled its role. Behind the mirror, in the center of the chapel, the floor began to split. Boards cracked apart, and beneath them a staircase, the same one I had seen underground before, but now it spiraled upward. I stepped forward. The villagers, all of me, parted silently to let me pass. As I descended into the spiral that climbed, I felt time thinning. Every second stretched and folded like pages in a burning book. I saw flashes: the girl laughing while on fire, the stone face melting into a pool of teeth, a baby with a spiral instead of a mouth, a television screen filled with my face, speaking words I didn't know. And then, I emerged into a room made of eyes, walls pulsing, every surface blinking, watching. And at the center of the room stood a figure, not me, not him, but something wearing us both. And its skin was smooth like wax, and its face rotated constantly, flickering through expressions like a spinning wheel. When it finally settled on one, it was hers, the girl in the red dress. "You opened the loop," she said. "You remembered too early." I tried to speak, but my tongue dissolved. "You were never meant to find the chapel first," she whispered. "But now you've skipped ahead." She stepped toward me, reached out, touched my chest, and with a smile that didn't belong to her or anyone else, she said, "Let's show them how it ends." The spiral had always been a door, Not a symbol, not a curse, not even a map. A door. I know that now, because I stepped through it. Or maybe I was the door. It's hard to say when time folds. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in the chapel, the jungle, or even Pemba. I was in a house. But not just any house. It knew me. Old photos lined the walls, photos that shifted every time I blinked. One moment I was a child standing next to a man with no eyes. Next, I was holding a spiral-shaped birthday cake. Then, I was in a coffin, smiling up at myself. The house creaked like it was breathing, and every room I entered was another version of me. In the kitchen, I watched a version of myself stirring something black in a pot. Soup for the guest, he said without looking up. In the bedroom, a different version was asleep, but crying. Tears ran upward, pooling on the ceiling. In the attic, I found one chained to the wall, whispering, "Don't let her wear you. She doesn't take them off. She never takes them off." He looked up, and his face was my father's. Except I'd never known my father. Every door led deeper inside. But the house didn't end. It looped. Hallway into hallway, stairwell into stairwell, until I opened one door and stepped back into the chapel. But now it was upside down. The pews hung from the ceiling like bats. The pulpit bled honey, and the villagers with my face stood on the walls, tilted like paintings. And in the center, floating just above the spiral, was the girl, not in red, now in white. Her eyes were fully black, no pupils, no whites, just void. "You left the house too early," she said, voice layered like wind over broken glass. "You weren't supposed to see the kitchen." "Not yet." She stepped forward. Her feet didn't touch the floor. "You let the dream burn too soon." She reached out, not to me, but to the spiral at my feet, and it peeled up like paper. Behind it was a mirror. Another one, but this time the glass showed the house burning, and inside someone was still trapped. Not me. The man in the suit, pounding on the windows. Smoke coiling from his mouth like reverse breath. His tie was gone. His hands were wrong, too many fingers. And behind him, I saw dozens of spirals glowing in the wallpaper, each one blinking, each one whispering, "You're not the first. She's always been the one waking." I turned away from the mirror, but the chapel kept rotating. Gravity didn't matter anymore. Every step I took brought me closer to the center, even when I tried to walk away. The spiral was pulling me in, or maybe it was folding the world into me. I don't remember falling. I only remember blinking, and opening my eyes on the floor of the village again. I was back. The chapel was gone. The jungle was still. But I wasn't alone. The villagers were all gathered around me, silent, watching. And beside them stood the girl, dressed in white, barefoot, her eyes normal again. She knelt beside me. "You're leaking," she whispered, touching my forehead. Blood, sweat, memory, I didn't know which. She leaned in and said something I still don't understand. "You dreamed the house, but it dreamed you first." And then she was gone. Just like that. No smoke, no spiral, gone. I stumbled to the river and stared at my reflection in the water. It was normal. No delay, no flicker, no mask. But I didn't feel like myself. I didn't feel like anyone. And then, in the trees across the water, I saw movement. Not an animal, not a person, but a window, just hovering there, like someone had cut a piece of the house and hung it in the forest. Inside the window, the kitchen, and something still stirring the pot. Slowly, relentlessly, I backed away. But the ground cracked beneath me, and something sharp pierced my foot. I reached down, a shard of mirror. I held it up and looked. My reflection smiled, but I wasn't smiling. And then it whispered, "You left the door open." I dropped it. It didn't hit the ground. It sank into the dirt, like a seed, and the soil around it began to twist slowly into a new spiral. That night I didn't sleep. None of us did. The village was quiet, too quiet. No insects, no wind, no breathing. Just a silence that pressed down like wet fabric. And then, sometime near dawn, we heard the sound. Not a scream, not a growl, a door, opening, and somewhere in the distance a fire. I thought I could escape it. The village was so quiet, so still. But the door was never far away. I had barely stepped back into the heart of the village when I heard it again. A low hum that seemed to come from the earth itself. It didn't belong to any living thing. It was as if the ground was calling. The villagers stood at the edge of the clearing, where the spiral had started to form. But they weren't looking at me. They were looking at the fire. The fire. It had begun at the center, just beyond the trees. And, in the crackling orange light, I saw what no one else could. I could feel it now. I had seen this fire before. It had been there in the house. It had been in the kitchen, in the attic, in the basement of the dream. A flame that never burned out, that only spread. And now the flames were reaching for the village. She's coming. The girl's voice whispered behind me. I spun around. She was there, but not there. Her face was covered by a shadow, a shroud of smoke that shifted in the wind. Her body flickered like a flame. She's always been here. Her lips barely moved. The others didn't seem to notice. Their eyes were dull, staring past me, focused on the fire as if hypnotized. I wanted to scream at them, to shake them free from the pull of the blaze, but I couldn't. The fire, it was the door. The spiral had opened, and now the village was dissolving. I took a step forward, and the ground beneath my feet buckled, cracks forming like veins beneath the skin. I couldn't breathe. The air felt heavy, suffocating. The girl's voice was there again, just behind me, close enough to feel her breath on my neck. You should have stayed in the house. I spun around, but she wasn't there. Instead, I saw the villagers moving, slowly now, toward the fire. They didn't speak, didn't even look at each other. They walked as though they had no choice. And they didn't. They were part of it. The fire reached the edge of the village and began to crawl up the trees. The flames whispered, like 1,000 tongues licking the bark. The sky turned darker, as if the night had forgotten its place. Suddenly, there was a loud crash, like a bell tolling across time. A heavy, ancient sound that made the very air tremble. I looked up. The window, the one I'd seen before, it had returned, but this time it was massive, towering above me, stretching far into the sky. Through the glass, I saw the kitchen again, the same pot, stirring. But now the flame was different. It was a dark flame, a cold, consuming fire that turned the walls to ash as it reached out, hungry for something. And inside it, I saw the man, not the man from before, the one I had not seen in my dreams, but whose name I knew. The one the fire had been waiting for. I reached for him. I don't know why. Maybe because I thought I could save him. Maybe because he seemed so familiar. But the moment I touched the glass, I was pulled in. Into the window. Into the fire. I woke up in the village square. The fire was gone, but the air still smelled of smoke. The villagers were gone too. All of them, except for the girl. She stood in the middle of the square, staring at me with those empty eyes. But now there was something else. Something darker. Her skin was peeling away in places, like burnt paper. "It's done," she whispered. "It's all in the ash now." She stepped closer, and I could feel it, the door closing. The house had burned, but now it was back. Only there was no house left, nothing to return to. It was just the fire, just the ashes of truth. I looked at the village around me. It was still here, but it was empty. It felt like a ghost. The girl took my hand, and as I looked into her eyes, I finally understood. She had been waiting for me to open the door, to burn the house, to become the fire. She smiled, her lips cracked. And for the first time, I felt the weight of her words. "You're free now, and you always were." But then the earth trembled again, and I realized that freedom had never been mine. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. The girl's hand tightened around mine, but I couldn't feel her touch. It was like my skin had become numb, as if I had been hollowed out from the inside. The air was thick with smoke, but it wasn't smoke. It was the remnants of something long forgotten, something buried beneath the soil of Pemba, something that had waited to rise. The village was empty now, save for me and the girl. I tried to pull away, to break free from the grip of whatever held me here, but my legs wouldn't move. The world around me seemed to tilt, as though gravity had suddenly become a suggestion rather than a law. And then, in the stillness, I heard it. A whisper. It wasn't the girl. It wasn't the wind. It was the village itself. The ancient bones of Pemba speaking through the cracks in the earth, through the cracks in my mind. You cannot leave. The voice was cold, hollow. It sounded like the earth itself was speaking to me, the ground beneath my feet shuddering with each syllable. You are part of it now. I looked at the girl, her face still obscured by shadows, her eyes empty. But I could see something else now, movement in those eyes. Something darker, deeper than fear. Something older. I didn't mean to. I started, but the words felt like they were being ripped out of me, one by one. The girl didn't speak. She just stared at me, her gaze unblinking. And then the echo returned. It was familiar, like the hum of a forgotten memory. A pulse in the back of my mind that I couldn't quite place. But I knew it. I had felt it before. When I was at the house. When I had touched the glass. It was the door, the window. The very thing that had drawn me into this nightmare. The very thing that had pulled me into the fire. And now it was calling again. I tried to move, to run. But my body wouldn't respond. I could feel the heat, feel the pulse in my chest growing faster, stronger. It was like the fire had somehow taken root inside me, its flame spreading through my veins. I looked around, desperate for an escape, but there was nowhere to go. The village was still there, but it was empty. Empty except for me. Empty except for her. And then it happened. The ground split open. A deep crack formed beneath my feet, snaking outwards like the tendrils of some ancient creature. The earth groaned as though in pain, the air thick with the smell of decay. I looked down, and at the bottom of the crack, I saw something moving. Something alive. It was a shape. Indistinct at first, but then it began to form. Slowly, it emerged from the depths. Something dark. Something that seemed to slither in and out of the shadows. A face. Not the girl's face. Not the villagers. But a face I knew all too well. It was the man. The one I had seen in the window. The one who had stirred the pot in the dream. The man who had been waiting. He stepped forward. His form emerging from the crack like a figure pulled from the depths of hell itself. His eyes were hollow, but his gaze was fixed on me. I could feel it. He knew who I was. He knew what I had done, and I knew, with a terrible certainty, that I was the one who had opened the door. I had become the fire. It's too late now. His voice was like stone. Like something carved into the earth itself. The ashes are all that remain. I wanted to speak, to deny it, to tell him it wasn't my fault. But the words caught in my throat, and all I could do was stare at him. He stepped closer, and with each movement, the ground seemed to tremble beneath his feet. The air grew heavier, like the weight of centuries was pressing down on me. And then, just as I thought I would collapse under the pressure, he stopped. He didn't speak. He just stared at me, his hollow eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. And then, the crack began to close. I felt a pull, a force drawing me towards it, as though the very earth was trying to swallow me whole. The girl's hand was still in mine, but it was colder now, as if she had become something other. Something that didn't belong. I tried to break free, but it was too late. The ground beneath me shifted, the crack closing, and the fire seemed to rise once more, swirling around us like a storm. I could feel it in my chest, in my lungs, in my soul. The door was closing, and the fire was taking me with it. The crack in the earth began to seal, but it wasn't the end. Not yet. I could still feel it. The weight of the village pressing down on me, its bones cracking beneath the pressure. The fire that had been swirling around us began to recede, but it left something far worse in its wake. A silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. It pressed against my chest, as though the village itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. And then, as if to answer that unspoken question, I heard a voice. It was faint at first, almost inaudible. But it grew louder, clearer. A low murmur in the distance. "You've come back, haven't you?" The words echoed through the air, though they weren't coming from the man or the girl. They came from deeper, deeper than the crack in the earth, deeper than the bones of Pemba. They came from something older, something forgotten. I turned, my eyes desperately searching for the source of the voice. My body was still heavy, weighed down by the presence of the village. I could feel the girl's hand growing colder, as if her grip was slipping, as if she was fading, becoming part of the darkness. I had to act. But every instinct screamed at me to run, to leave before the silence consumed me. But the voice persisted, growing stronger, pulling me toward it. "You don't belong here. Not anymore." It was coming from beneath the ground, from the very core of the village. The depths of Pemba were calling to me, urging me to descend. I stumbled forward, my feet dragging against the earth, fighting against the urge to turn and flee. The earth trembled beneath me. I could feel it in my bones. A low, guttural rumble. It wasn't an earthquake. It was something more deliberate, a signal. And then, a flash. I blinked, and in that moment, everything shifted. The village, once empty, was now filled with figures. They moved like shadows, like echoes of the past. They weren't human. Not anymore. They were something else. Their faces were blurred, their forms distorted, like reflections in a cracked mirror. But their eyes, those eyes, were fixed on me, all of them, staring at me with that same hollow gaze. And the voice spoke again, this time clearer, more distinct. "You shouldn't have come." I wanted to scream, to run, to escape, but my body wouldn't respond. I was rooted to the spot, my legs trembling, my chest tightening. And then, just as the village seemed to close in around me, I saw it. A door. A door I hadn't noticed before. It was standing open, its wooden frame dark against the backdrop of the decaying village. It beckoned me, an invitation, an offering of escape. But I knew better now. I knew what was behind that door. The fire had been the warning. The man, the girl, the whispers. They were all part of the test. I couldn't walk through that door. Not again. But the figures, the shadows, they were moving toward me now, their steps slow but deliberate. The ground trembled with their every movement, like the very earth was acknowledging their presence. The air grew colder, the smoke thickening around us. It was as though the village itself was suffocating, closing its grip on me, tightening the noose. I could hear the girl's voice now, faint but insistent. "You must go through it." I turned to look at her, but her face was even more faded than before. She wasn't fully there anymore. She was slipping away, becoming part of the darkness, just like the others. "You have to. It's the only way out." Her voice echoed, but there was no conviction in it. No warmth. Just a cold, hollow echo of what had once been. I wanted to reach for her, to pull her back from the edge, but it was too late. The door was the only thing left, the only choice. And then the whisper came again. "You've come back, and now you must stay." I turned, desperate to break free, to find some path, some way out, but it was too late. The shadows were all around me, their eyes gleaming in the dark, their voices merging into a single chorus. "Stay with us? Stay forever." The door was still there, but it wasn't just a door anymore. It was a portal, a gateway to something deeper, darker, a hole in the fabric of reality itself. I couldn't go through it. Not again. But could I leave? Could I escape? And then, from the depths of the earth, I heard it. A sound. A growl. low and menacing, like something awakening after a long slumber. The village trembled once more, but this time, the tremor was different. It wasn't just the ground shaking. It was the earth itself shifting, as if the village were alive and hungry. The air grew thick with anticipation. The ground beneath my feet shook violently, as if the very bones of the village were grinding against each other, trying to make way for something immense, something ancient. The shadows around me were no longer silent. They murmured, whispered in tongues I couldn't understand, but the tone was unmistakable, a warning, a demand. I looked again at the door. It loomed there, its frame dark and inviting, but now I knew better. The village had changed, and with it, everything around it. The door wasn't just an escape. It was a trap, a final test to see if I was willing to make the ultimate choice. I turned away from it, pushing myself forward, but something pulled at my heart, a deep, gnawing sense of dread, like something was just on the other side of the horizon, waiting to swallow me whole. The girl's voice echoed once more, faint but insistent. You have to go through it. It's the only way. But I didn't want to. I couldn't. Not after everything I had witnessed. The fire, the shadows, the death that seemed to cling to every inch of this cursed village. I felt a presence behind me, something ancient, something that had waited for this moment. The shadows grew thicker, swirling in on themselves. They stretched out toward me, long and hungry. Come with us, they whispered. And then, suddenly, a growl broke through the air, a low, primal sound that seemed to shake the earth itself. The shadows recoiled, and the ground beneath me split wide open. From the depths, something stirred. It was huge, a force of nature, so vast, so overwhelming, that the very world seemed to bend under its weight. The air turned cold, so cold that my breath turned to mist in front of me, freezing on my skin. I stumbled backward, heart racing, my legs like lead, as the ground around me quaked with an intensity that threatened to swallow me whole. From the darkness, a figure began to emerge. It was not human, it was more than that. A monstrous shape, its form shifting and rippling as though it were made of pure shadow, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The creature's silhouette loomed over me, taller than any building in the village, its limbs stretching unnaturally, as though it had crawled out from some nightmare that had long been buried beneath the earth. The growl echoed again, deeper this time, vibrating through my chest. My body was frozen, the cold seeping into my bones, my heart pounding against my rib cage as if trying to break free. I wanted to run. I needed to run, but the creature was already here. You're too late. The words were like a cold wind in my ears, carried by the voice that no longer belonged to the girl. It was a voice as old as the village, as old as the earth itself. It was the voice of the village's curse. I tried to turn, to find a way out, but the ground beneath my feet had changed. It was no longer solid. It was soft, like quicksand, pulling me down with each step I took. My legs sank deeper, and I could feel the weight of the earth pressing down on me, pushing me into its depths. It's too late for you. The creature was closer now, so close I could hear the grinding of its bones, the scraping of its claws against the earth. The shadows swirled around me, blocking out the light, trapping me in an impenetrable darkness. I was drowning in it. Stay with us. The voice echoed through my mind. It wasn't just the creature. It was the village itself, its soul, calling out to me, urging me to succumb to its will. The darkness was everywhere now, pressing against my skin, filling my lungs. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The weight of it all was too much. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I heard the girl's voice one last time. You have to fight. You have to resist. It was faint, almost lost in the abyss, but it reached me. I dug deep, pulling whatever strength I had left into my limbs. I pushed against the earth, against the creature, against the shadows that tried to claim me. With every ounce of willpower I had, I forced myself to move. It was a battle, not just against the creature, but against the very forces of this cursed village. The earth resisted me, the shadows whispered in my ear, trying to drag me back, but I fought with everything I had. And then, with one final desperate push, I broke free. The world shifted once more, and I found myself back at the edge of the village, gasping for air. My heart pounded in my chest, my body trembling from the effort. The creature was gone, but I could still feel its presence, lurking just beneath the surface. The shadows had not disappeared. They were waiting, watching me, waiting for me to slip again. I looked around. The village was silent now. The fire was out. The darkness remained, but it felt different, empty, like it was waiting for something. Or someone. And then the whisper came again, as faint as the last breath of a dying man. You can't leave. Not until you understand. I didn't want to listen. I didn't want to stay. But something inside me told me I had no choice. I had to find out what the village was hiding. What had been buried in its depths for so long. The village seemed different now. Lifeless, yet pulsating with a quiet energy that I could feel pressing against my skin. The air was thick, charged with a tension I couldn't understand. An unsettling calm that felt like the moment just before a storm breaks. The shadows still whispered, but now they seemed less like warnings and more like promises. Promises of something I couldn't quite grasp, but could feel creeping closer with each step I took. I needed answers. The whispers had spoken of a curse, something that had been buried deep within the village. But what was it? Why did it cling to this place like a heavy shroud? I had no answers, but the growing sense of urgency told me that I didn't have much time left. The village wasn't going to wait forever, and neither was whatever force held it in its grip. The narrow path ahead twisted and turned, leading me deeper into the heart of the village. The buildings, once imposing and dilapidated, now seemed to lean toward me, their windows like eyes that watched my every move. The ground felt soft underfoot, as if the earth itself were shifting beneath my weight. I turned a corner and stumbled upon something that made my heart drop into my stomach. A large stone slab, half buried in the earth, its surface covered in ancient symbols and markings. It was as though it had been placed there for a purpose, left untouched for centuries. I crouched down, tracing my fingers over the cold surface, trying to make sense of the symbols. They were unfamiliar, yet there was something disturbingly familiar about them, as if they had been burned into my memory long ago. As I ran my fingers over the stone, a low hum vibrated through the air. It was barely audible, but it was there, coming from deep beneath the earth, as though the village itself were alive, breathing, waiting for something to stir. I stepped back, my heart racing as the hum grew louder, more urgent. The shadows around me seemed to stretch, warping and twisting as if they were reaching for the stone. Suddenly, the earth beneath me cracked with a loud snap, and a scream erupted from deep within the ground. It was a sound unlike anything I had ever heard before. Otherworldly, a cry of pure anguish that sent chills down my spine. I staggered back, my breath catching in my throat. The air around me was thick with a foul scent, like the decay of something ancient. The ground seemed to ripple, as if something was rising from beneath the surface, something that had been buried for far too long. I turned and ran, my feet pounding against the earth as the ground trembled beneath me. The shadows followed, clinging to my heels, as though they were alive, drawn to my every movement. The village was changing, transforming. It was no longer just a place. It was something alive, something hungry. And it was coming for me. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get out. But every direction I turned led me deeper into the heart of the village, as though the very streets had been designed to trap me. I stumbled into a clearing where a massive tree stood, its gnarled roots stretching out like claws. its branches reaching up into the sky like twisted fingers. The tree was unlike anything I had ever seen before. Its bark was black, like burned wood, and its leaves shimmered in the moonlight, casting an eerie glow on everything around it. I approached it cautiously, the air around me thick with the sense of foreboding. As I got closer, I noticed something strange at the base of the tree. A small hole, just large enough for a person to crawl through. It was then that I remembered something the girl had said earlier. There's a way out, but only if you're willing to face the truth. The truth? What truth? I didn't know, but I could feel it. Calling me, beckoning me toward that hole. I hesitated for a moment, my heart racing, my mind screaming for me to turn back. But the village was closing in. I could feel it. The curse was tightening its grip. And if I didn't do something soon, it would consume me just like it had consumed the others. Without another thought, I dropped to my knees and crawled into the hole. It was narrow, and the earth around me was cold and damp. I crawled for what felt like hours, the air growing thicker with each passing moment. The walls of the tunnel seemed to close in on me, suffocating me with their weight. Finally, the tunnel opened into a large underground chamber. The air was heavy with the scent of mold and decay. The walls were covered in the same ancient symbols I had seen on the stone slab. In the center of the chamber, a stone altar stood, its surface cracked and stained with dark, dried blood. And beneath it, something stirred. A low, guttural growl rumbled through the chamber, and I froze, my blood running cold. Something was awakening from the depths, something that had been waiting for centuries. I wasn't alone. The growl echoed through the underground chamber, reverberating off the walls and rattling my bones. It was a sound that made my heart race and my limbs freeze in place. Whatever was down here was waking up, and I had no idea what it was, but the sheer power of its presence made my skin prickle with fear. I wanted to run, to flee back through the tunnel and out into the open air, where I might find safety. But there was no turning back now. The path had been set, and I had crawled into the darkness willingly. I had sought answers, and now, it seemed, the answers were ready to reveal themselves, whether I was ready or not. The growl intensified, followed by a deep, shuddering breath that rattled the very foundation of the chamber. Then came the sound of something scraping across stone, as though claws were dragging themselves along the floor, leaving deep gouges in their wake. I slowly raised my head, my gaze drawn to the stone altar in the center of the room. The dark bloodstains on its surface seemed to pulse with a life of their own, glowing faintly in the dim light that filtered through the cracks in the ceiling. Something was rising beneath it. Something that had been bound there for centuries, waiting for the right moment to break free. I could feel it now, the presence in the room. It was like a living force, a malevolent energy that pressed against my chest, suffocating me with its weight. The very air seemed to vibrate with it, as though the room itself was alive, responding to the awakening of whatever lay beneath the altar. I had to know what it was. I had to see it. I took a step forward, my feet hesitant on the cold stone floor. My eyes were fixed on the altar, my pulse pounding in my ears, but I could feel something moving in the shadows at the edge of the chamber. The air grew colder, and the scent of decay grew stronger with each passing second. Then, suddenly, the stone altar shifted. A crack appeared down the center, the stone splitting with a deafening noise, as something pushed its way up from beneath. The darkness beneath the altar seemed to twist and writhe, as though it were alive, trying to break free from the confines of the stone. And then it emerged. It was difficult to describe. At first, it appeared to be a mass of writhing shadows and tendrils, its form constantly shifting, never quite the same from one moment to the next. But as it rose higher, I could see its true shape, an enormous, horrific figure towering over me. Its body was humanoid, but twisted, covered in slick, glistening black scales that reflected no light. Its face was the stuff of nightmares, a distorted, grotesque visage with hollow, empty eyes that seemed to stare right through me. Its mouth was wide, too wide, filled with sharp, jagged teeth that gleamed like knives in the dim light. The creature let out a blood-curdling screech, a sound that seemed to reverberate through my very soul. My knees went weak, and for a moment, I thought I might pass out from the sheer terror of it. But I didn't. Instead, I forced myself to stay standing, to breathe, to focus. The creature, if it could even be called that, stood before me, its massive form towering over me like a dark god. Its claws were sharp, like the blades of a scythe, and its wings, vast and leathery, unfurled from its back, casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the room whole. And then, in a voice that was neither human nor animal, it spoke. "You should not have come." It rasped, the words dripping with venom. "This is my domain, my prison. And now you are mine." The words sent a jolt of cold fear through me. I had heard the legends, the whispers of the ancient evil that dwelled beneath the village, but nothing could have prepared me for the sight of it. Alive, awake, and aware of my presence, I had come seeking answers. But now, I realized the answers were nothing more than a curse. The truth I had uncovered was far worse than anything I could have imagined. I had to leave. I had to escape before it was too late. But the creature was already moving, its massive form shifting as it began to advance toward me. Its eyes locked onto mine, its gaze heavy and unyielding, as though it could see into the very core of my being. I stumbled backward, my feet slipping on the slick stone floor. I needed to run, but my legs felt as though they were cemented to the ground. The creature's claws scraped the stone with a terrifying screech, each step bringing it closer, its monstrous form looming ever larger. My mind raced, desperate for a way out, but there was no escape. The tunnel, the village, the earth itself, they were all closing in. This was the end. I could feel it. The creature's voice reached me again, cold and mocking. "You think you can escape?" it hissed. "You are already mine, and so is this village. It will consume you, just as it has consumed the others." And then, with a final, deafening screech, the creature lunged toward me. Time seemed to stretch as the creature lunged toward me, its claws slicing through the air with a speed I couldn't fathom. I barely had time to react before the force of its presence slammed into me, sending me sprawling to the ground. I hit the cold stone floor with a heavy thud, my breath knocked out of me. Pain shot through my ribs, but the terror that gripped me was far worse than any physical wound. The creature loomed over me, its rancid breath washing over my face, the stench of decay and death filling my senses. Its eyes gleamed with malice as it raised its claws, ready to strike. In that instant, I felt the weight of my decision. The sheer madness of coming here, to this forsaken place, had finally caught up with me. But I couldn't give up. I wouldn't. I had to survive. I had to find a way out. With a surge of desperation, I scrambled to my feet, my legs trembling beneath me. My eyes flicked around the chamber, searching for anything that might help me escape. The altar, the stone walls, the cracks in the ceiling where light barely filtered through, they all felt like a cage closing in. The creature was relentless, closing in with each breath. Its shadow seemed to consume everything in its path, and I could feel the heat radiating from its body. Even though the air around us was cold and damp, it was more than just a monster. It was a force of nature, something ancient and terrifying that had been trapped beneath the earth, waiting for this moment. I had to think. I had to act. My eyes darted to the stone altar again, and a horrifying realization struck me. The creature was not just attacking me. It was guarding something. The altar, the bloodstains, the whispers in the dark, they were all connected. I reached for the knife at my belt, my fingers numb as I gripped the hilt. The creature's form seemed to blur as it charged at me, but my focus was on the altar, on the thing that it was trying to protect. I had no idea what would happen if I destroyed it, but in that moment I knew I had no choice. With every ounce of strength I had left, I dashed toward the altar, my heart hammering in my chest. The creature let out a deafening roar as it lunged, but I was already there, my hands gripping the edge of the stone. I slammed the knife down, hoping against hope that I could break the curse that held this place together. For a moment, nothing happened. The world seemed to stand still, the air thick with tension. But then, the stone beneath my hands shuddered. The ground trembled, and the sound of cracking echoed through the chamber. I looked up, my breath catching in my throat as the altar began to crumble. The creature howled in fury, but it was too late. The altar split wide open, and from the depths of the darkness beneath, something rose. Something far worse than the creature itself. At first, it was just a shape, a shadow moving in the dark, but then it took form. A figure, tall and gaunt, draped in tattered robes, its face hidden beneath a hood that seemed to swallow the light around it. It was more ancient than anything I had ever seen, older than the village itself, its presence overwhelming. The creature, the one that had been chasing me, paused, its form wavering as it looked toward the newly emerged figure. For the first time, it seemed uncertain, hesitant. Fear flashed in its eyes, and then, in a voice that reverberated like thunder, the figure spoke. "The time has come," it said, its voice deep and hollow, as though it was speaking from the very bowels of the earth. "The village has been waiting for this moment, and you have played your part." I tried to take a step back, but my legs were like lead, frozen in place by the sheer gravity of the situation. The creature, the dark god beneath the altar, seemed to shrink, its form crumbling under the weight of the figure's presence. The figure raised a hand, and the air around us shifted. It was like watching the world unravel, the very fabric of reality starting to tear apart at the seams. Shadows twisted, light flickered, and the walls seemed to close in on me. "You thought you could escape," the figure said, its gaze now turning toward me. "But there is no escape. There is only acceptance." Suddenly, everything changed. The stone floor beneath my feet cracked open, and the chamber began to distort, the very walls warping and shifting as though they were made of clay. I could feel the pull of something deep below, an invisible force that was dragging me down, pulling me into the abyss. I struggled, but it was no use. The ground gave way beneath me, and I found myself falling, the darkness swallowing me whole. I fell. There was no sound, no light, just an endless, consuming void. The air around me felt thick, like I was drowning in something far worse than water. The sensation of falling stretched on forever, and I wondered if I would ever reach the ground. Would there even be a ground? Or was I falling into the very bowels of the earth, into the ancient darkness where time and space no longer made sense? I had no answers, only the unbearable weight of despair pressing against my chest. The force pulling me downward was undeniable, relentless, and it seemed to come from every direction at once. My stomach churned, my heart pounded with fear, and I realized, with a sudden clarity, that I was not alone. The darkness shifted, swirling around me like a living thing, as though it were feeding off my terror. I gasped for air, but it was as if the very atmosphere had been drained away. And then, as quickly as it began, I stopped. The ground, hard and cold, slammed into me with a sickening thud, forcing the breath from my lungs. Pain surged through me, but I didn't have the luxury to feel it. I was already scrambling to my feet, my mind racing as I tried to understand where I was. The void had swallowed me whole, but now I was somewhere else. Somewhere unnatural. I staggered to my feet, the floor beneath me slick with something cold and wet. The air was thick with the stench of decay, the same rancid smell that had clung to the creature back in the chamber above. I looked around, my heart's skipping a beat as I tried to make sense of my surroundings. I was in a vast cavern, the walls stretching up high above me, disappearing into a blackened sky that seemed to pulse with an eerie, unnatural glow. Jagged rock formations jutted out from the walls, casting long, twisted shadows that danced in the dim light. In the distance, I could hear something, a low, guttural hum, like the sound of a far-off storm. The sound filled the space, growing louder, more pronounced, until it vibrated through my very bones. This place, it wasn't natural. It wasn't part of the world I knew. A sudden shiver ran down my spine as I became aware of a presence, something watching me. I wasn't alone. Eyes, glowing faintly in the dark, seemed to flicker in and out of existence. They were scattered across the cavern's walls, lurking in the shadows like predators, waiting for the right moment to strike. I wasn't safe. I couldn't stay here. I turned, my mind a whirl of panic, and began to run. My footsteps echoed in the cavern, too loud in the silence, as I bolted in the direction of the sound. The hum, growing louder, seemed to be calling to me, drawing me deeper into this strange world. I had no choice but to follow it. The air around me thickened as I moved, a strange energy pulsating from the very walls. It was like the cave itself was alive, breathing, watching me. Then, I saw it. At the end of the cavern stood a massive stone archway, its surface carved with symbols I couldn't comprehend. The hum came from beyond it, pulsing with a rhythm that resonated through my body. I didn't hesitate. I ran toward it, my feet slipping over the slick floor, my breath coming in ragged gasps. But as I reached the archway, something stopped me. A force, cold and unseen, pressed against me. It felt like a wall, a barrier that I couldn't break through. My body froze, the energy of the place creeping into my skin, wrapping around my limbs. I was trapped. No! I gritted my teeth, summoning every ounce of strength I had left, but it was no use. The barrier held firm. I could feel it pulling at my mind, like it was trying to sift through my thoughts, searching for something. Then, a voice, a whisper, low, guttural, and familiar. You should have never come here. The voice sounded like it was coming from all around me, echoing in the cavern. My blood ran cold as I recognized the words. They were the same words I had heard earlier, when I first entered the village. But this time they felt different, more alive, more real. I turned, and there, emerging from the shadows, was the figure I had seen before, the dark figure that had risen from the altar. It moved slowly, its presence heavy and oppressive. And in its wake, the ground seemed to warp, the walls shifting like they were made of liquid. The cavern, the very air around me, seemed to bend and twist under the figure's influence. You have awakened what should remain buried, the figure said, its voice reverberating through the stone, its form shifting in and out of existence. Now you must face the consequences. The ground beneath my feet rumbled, a tremor running through the cavern. Something was coming, something terrible. I had no choice. I had to fight. The figure loomed closer, its shape wavering like smoke, its presence like a living shadow that threatened to swallow everything in its path. The very air seemed to crackle with its malevolent energy. I could feel it pressing against my chest, suffocating me, as if the very essence of the cavern was alive, reacting to its presence. The ground beneath my feet rumbled again, sending a fresh wave of panic through me. The stone archway behind me seemed to pulse, its symbols glowing with an eerie, unnatural light, as if they were alive. And then I heard it, the sound of something moving in the dark, something far too large, too ancient. The figure stepped closer, its features still indistinguishable, an indistinct void where its face should be. A low, rumbling growl echoed from deep within the figure's form, vibrating through the cavern. It wasn't just a sound, it was a feeling, something deep inside me that made my heart race, my blood run cold. You should not have disturbed the rest of the ancients. The figure intoned, its voice reverberating in my mind as much as in my ears. You have awakened what should never have been disturbed. I took a step back, my body trembling with fear, but the figure's presence pressed in, trapping me. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to escape, but the very air seemed to be holding me in place, forcing me to face whatever nightmare was unfolding. What are you? I managed to choke out, my voice weak, but the figure only chuckled. The sound was like a low, menacing rumble, as if the earth itself were laughing at my feeble attempt to understand. The figure reached out with one hand, its fingers elongated and covered in a slit, blackened skin that seemed to slither as if alive. It touched the stone wall, and with a hiss, the stone began to crack and split open, revealing a darker, deeper chamber beyond. It was as if the very cavern was breathing, shifting to reveal something ancient, something that had been hidden away for centuries, perhaps longer. The air grew heavier, thicker, and the ground beneath me trembled once more. A voice, no, a chorus of voices, whispered from the darkness of the newly exposed chamber. It was a cacophony of ancient languages, a garbled mix of words that should never have been spoken. My head spun as I struggled to comprehend the meanings, the words they spoke clawing at the edges of my sanity. The figure's eyes, if it could be said to have them, burned with a cold, calculating light. They pierced me like daggers, cutting through me in a way that no physical pain could. You have disturbed the balance, it said, its voice now cold and sharp, its fingers curling around the stone as though it could bend reality itself. The awakening has begun. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder, though no one was near. It was the touch of death. I tried to scream, to move, but my body felt frozen, locked in place by the weight of what was to come. And then, as if summoned by some unseen force, it emerged. From the chamber beyond the stone wall, something huge and twisted slithered into view. Its form was a grotesque combination of flesh and shadow, moving in a way that defied the laws of nature. It was the size of a mountain, a nightmare made flesh. Its eyes glowed with an unholy light, casting an eerie glow over the cavern, and its mouth opened wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth that dripped with a fall. Viscous liquid. Its presence filled the cavern, pressing in on me from all sides, suffocating the very air. I couldn't move. My legs refused to respond. It was as if my body had become a prisoner to the darkness, to the presence of the creature that now stood before me. Do you see now? The figure whispered in my ear, its voice like ice against my skin. This is what you have unleashed. You cannot undo what has been done. The ground beneath my feet cracked open, and from the darkness below, thousands of eyes blinked open, one after another, as if they were watching me. They were the eyes of something ancient, something beyond human comprehension. I looked up, and the creature, was closer. Its maw gaped wider, and I could see its massive, gnarled tongue dripping with a foul substance. It hissed, a sound so terrible it made my blood run cold, and I felt its presence inside my very bones, crawling beneath my skin. The figure stepped forward, its form shifting, merging with the darkness that surrounded it. There is no escape, the figure whispered. You have brought it into the world. Now, you must suffer the consequences. A strange pressure built in my chest, and before I could understand what was happening, the ground beneath me gave way once more. I plummeted into the darkness, into the waiting maw of the creature that had been set free. I fell. There was no time to scream, no chance to brace for impact. The darkness consumed me entirely, as if I were plunging into an endless pit. The air around me seemed to thicken, and a foul stench filled my nostrils, the smell of decay and rot that clung to my skin and crept into my lungs. Time lost meaning as I plummeted deeper. The sound of rushing wind was deafening, and my body felt weightless, suspended in a void between life and death. The abyss seemed endless, a place where the laws of nature no longer applied. Every second stretched into eternity, each one more suffocating than the last. Then, with a violent jolt, I landed hard on something soft yet unyielding, as if the ground itself had been altered by the nightmare that had swallowed me whole. The impact sent a shockwave of pain through my body, and I gasped for air as I tried to rise, only to find my legs unresponsive, my vision blurred, and for a moment I wondered if I had lost consciousness. But I hadn't. I forced myself to sit up, clutching the cold, damp stone beneath me. The air here was thick and heavy, and the oppressive stench grew worse. I could barely see, but the faint glow of some distant light illuminated the cavern I had fallen into. It was vast, stretching farther than my eyes could make sense of, its walls covered in strange, pulsing symbols that glowed a sickly green. The ground was littered with bones, human, animal, and something far worse. The bones were twisted, cracked, and weathered with age, but some still seemed to bear the remnants of flesh, decayed but clinging to the skeletal remains in a grotesque mockery of life. A sound, faint at first, reached my ears. A whisper, low and rhythmic, as though something, or someone, was chanting in the distance. It was a language I didn't recognize, a series of guttural sounds that seemed to echo off the walls of this impossible cavern. As my senses returned, I realized that I wasn't alone. From the shadows, eyes blinked open, countless pairs of them, glowing faintly in the dark. They were watching me, waiting. Some were embedded in the walls, others seemed to move like insects, crawling over the stones in an unsettling, silent procession. I tried to stand, but my legs betrayed me. My body was weak, as if the fall had drained all my strength. My hands scraped the stone as I struggled to push myself up, only to collapse back down in exhaustion. The whispers grew louder. Suddenly, I felt a presence, something behind me. A cold, unnatural sensation that made my skin crawl. I turned, and my breath caught in my throat. The figure, the one from the archway, stood just a few feet away, its form flickering like a candle in the wind. It was no longer just a shadow. Its outline shimmered with an unnatural glow, the edges of its body bleeding into the darkness around it. Its eyes, those terrible, glowing eyes, were fixed on me, burning with malice. "You have entered the heart of the abyss," it said, its voice a low, almost soothing hiss. "And now, you will witness what you have awakened." Before I could respond, the ground trembled again. The walls seemed to vibrate with the force of some unseen entity moving beneath the earth. The whispers grew louder, shifting into frantic murmurs, as if the very cavern was alive, stirring in response to the figure's words. Then, something massive shifted in the distance. The creature. It was moving toward me, its enormous body dragging through the dark. I couldn't see it fully, but I could feel its presence growing stronger, an overwhelming force that threatened to crush everything in its path. The air seemed to grow colder with each passing second. "You cannot escape," the figure continued, its voice cutting through the deafening silence. "It has been summoned. It is here." I turned to run, but my legs were too weak, my body too broken. The creature was close now, so close I could hear its heavy breathing, each exhale like the groan of a dying world. I scrambled, crawling over the cold stones, trying to get away from the inevitable doom that was closing in on me. And then the ground trembled once more. This time, the trembling was more violent. A deafening roar split the air, and the creature emerged from the shadows. It was massive, its body a writhing mass of blackened flesh, veins pulsing with an eerie light. Its eyes were too many, hundreds of eyes, each one staring at me with an intelligence that chilled me to the bone. Its mouth opened wide, a cavernous maw filled with rows upon rows of jagged teeth. It moved toward me with unnatural speed, its massive limbs reaching out to snatch me from the ground. I screamed, but my voice was drowned out by the creature's roar, which reverberated through the entire cavern. The air around me grew thick with the stench of death and decay, as the creature loomed above me, its grotesque form casting a shadow that seemed to swallow all light. And then, just as it was about to strike, a flash of blinding light. The light was unbearable, searing through the darkness like a weapon of divine fury. I squinted, my eyes burning from the intensity, unable to comprehend what was happening. The creature shrieked in agony, its roar echoing through the cavern as the light enveloped it, forcing it to retreat. But it wasn't retreating from fear. It was retreating from something far worse. I felt the pull of the light, the warmth washing over me, pushing away the suffocating cold that had gripped me ever since my fall. It was as though the very air was coming alive, shifting, pulsating with power. The presence of the figure, now nothing more than a fading shadow, seemed to vanish in the wake of the light, its form flickering like a dying flame. As the blinding radiance consumed everything, I felt the earth beneath me begin to shift. The cavern trembled one last time, and for a fleeting moment, I wondered if this was the end of it all. Perhaps I had been lost to this nightmare forever. But the light didn't blind me. It wasn't meant to kill me. It was meant to save me. With a final, thunderous roar, the creature recoiled and vanished into the shadows, swallowed by the very darkness it had once emerged from. Its monstrous form dissolved into the air, leaving nothing but the echoes of its terrible cry. The silence that followed was profound. I collapsed, my body trembling with exhaustion, every muscle in my limbs sore from the struggle. But the weight of the darkness was finally gone. The air around me was no longer thick with dread. It was clear, almost pure, as if the nightmare I had experienced was slipping away like a fading dream. Slowly, I stood. My legs were unsteady, but I was on my feet. The cavern, what was once an abyss, had transformed. It no longer felt alive with malice. The oppressive stench had dissipated, and the walls that once pulsed with malevolent symbols now appeared lifeless, cold. It was over. I looked around and I saw that the bones, human, animal, and unrecognizable, had disappeared. The creature, the dark forces that had held this place in their grip, had been banished. What remained was a desolate, empty space. The flickering shadows seemed to disappear, as if the light had driven away all that had once lurked in the dark. In the distance, I saw a familiar face. It was the old man. The one who had warned me about the village's curse, the one who had been a guide of sorts, though I hadn't fully understood his role until now. His expression was calm, as though he had been waiting for this moment. "You have done it," he said, his voice echoing softly in the stillness. "You've broken the curse that bound this place. The village is free, and so are you." I nodded, too exhausted to speak, but inside, I felt a sense of relief that I hadn't known was possible. The weight that had been pressing down on my chest for what felt like an eternity had lifted. The terror, the suffocating dread of the unknown, had finally been overcome. But I knew I couldn't stay here. There was nothing left for me in this place. I had to leave, to return to the world above. The old man gestured toward a narrow passage at the far side of the cavern. "Follow the path," he said. "It will lead you out. The village, it is no longer what it once was. It has been reborn." With one final glance at the empty, transformed cavern, I began my journey toward the light. Each step I took felt more natural, more grounded, as if the very earth beneath me was reassuring me that I was no longer walking in the shadow of something sinister. The passage was long, winding, and as I walked, I felt the darkness recede. The weight in my heart lightened with each step, and when I finally emerged from the cave into the world above, the sun greeted me. A golden, warm embrace that seemed to promise new beginnings. The village of Pemba was no longer a place of terror. Its spirit had been freed, and so had mine. And as I stood on the edge of the village, the wind gently rustling the leaves in the trees, I realized that some stories, some nightmares, are not meant to be ended with vengeance or fear. They are meant to be released, to be understood, and to be set free. And so, I walked away from Pemba, leaving behind the haunting echoes of the past.